In the unforgiving mountains of Afghanistan, where the thin air carries whispers of death and the rocky terrain holds secrets darker than the moonless nights, there lived a truth that military commanders refused to acknowledge. Sometimes the most lethal weapon in their arsenal wore a ponytail under her helmet. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos had spent 3 years proving herself in a brotherhood that measured worth in trigger pulls and confirmed kills. She had earned her place through blood, sweat, and precision that bordered on supernatural. Yet on that fateful morning, when enemy forces pinned down her unit in a valley that would later be known as Dead Man's Canyon, the general's first instinct was to sideline the one person who could save them all. "Stand aside, Sergeant. This is men's work." Those 7 words would echo through military history, not because they were spoken, but because of what happened next. What followed was a shot so impossible, so perfectly calculated, that it would be studied in sniper schools for decades to come. A shot that traveled not just 1,000 yards through mountain air, but through the barriers of prejudice, doubt, and military tradition. This is the true story of how one woman's steady hands and unbreakable spirit turned a suicide mission into a legend, and how a single bullet fired in defiance would reshape everything the military thought they knew about courage, skill, and who deserves to pull the trigger when lives hang in the balance. Maria Santos learned to shoot before she learned to drive. In the dusty backwoods of Texas, where her grandfather's ranch stretched as far as the eye could see, she spent summers perfecting her aim on tin cans, bottles, and eventually moving targets that her grandfather would set up with clockwork precision. Her hands, small and steady even as a child, seemed made for the weight of a rifle. By age 12, she could hit a quarter at 50 yards. By 15, she was outgunning grown men at the local shooting competitions. Her grandfather, Miguel Santos, was a Vietnam veteran who had served as a reconnaissance sniper. He recognized something special in Maria's natural ability, something that went beyond mere talent. She had the patience of a hunter, the focus of a scholar, and, most importantly, the emotional control that separated true marksmen from weekend warriors. While other teenagers were learning to text and drive, Maria was learning to read wind patterns and calculate bullet drop. The ranch became her training ground. Miguel taught her that shooting was only 20% of being a sniper. The rest was observation, calculation, patience, and the ability to remain absolutely still for hours at a time. He would hide targets throughout the property and send her out with nothing but a rifle and a notebook. She had to find each target, calculate the distance, account for environmental factors, and make the shot. But more than that, she had to explain her reasoning, prove that each shot was deliberate rather than lucky. "Anyone can pull a trigger," Miguel would tell her as they cleaned their rifles in the evening twilight. "But a true marksman understands the journey of the bullet from barrel to target. You have to think like the bullet, feel the air currents, respect the physics of death." Those lessons shaped more than just Maria's shooting ability. They shaped her character. She learned to approach problems methodically, to remain calm under pressure, and to trust her instincts even when others questioned her judgment. These skills would prove invaluable years later when she faced skeptical drill sergeants, hostile fellow recruits, and, eventually, the ultimate test of her abilities in combat. High school was a strange balance for Maria. During the day, she attended classes, played soccer, and maintained a perfect grade point average. Her teachers knew her as a quiet, thoughtful student who never caused trouble. Her classmates saw her as the girl who could fix anything mechanical and who seemed older than her years. But what none of them knew was that Maria spent her weekends and summers becoming one of the finest shooters in the state. At 17, she entered the National Junior Shooting Championships. The competition was dominated by boys from military families, young men who had grown up around firearms and competitive shooting. Maria was one of only 3 girls in her category, and the only one who didn't come from a military background. The other competitors treated her with a mixture of curiosity and condescension. They assumed she was there to make up the numbers, to provide a feel-good story about inclusion in a male-dominated sport. They were wrong. Maria dominated the competition from the first day. Her scores were not just good, they were historically exceptional. She broke records that had stood for 15 years. In the final round, shooting at targets 800 yards away in challenging wind conditions, she achieved perfect scores on shots that seasoned marksmen found nearly impossible. The silence that followed her final shot was deafening. Even the range officers stopped their conversations to watch the spotting scope confirm what everyone suspected, but few wanted to believe. After the competition, Maria was approached by military recruiters from multiple branches. The Marine Corps recruiter was particularly persistent, painting pictures of glory and honor that would come with serving as a reconnaissance sniper. The Army recruiter spoke of precision rifle teams and international competitions. The Navy discussed special operations and the elite nature of their sniper programs. But it was the Air Force recruiter who truly understood what motivated Maria. Staff Sergeant Jennifer Walsh was herself a sniper, one of the few women in the service to hold that designation. She didn't talk about glory or competition. Instead, she spoke about responsibility, about the weight of holding other people's lives in your hands, and about the unique challenges that women faced in combat roles. "I won't lie to you," Walsh told Maria as they sat in her grandfather's kitchen, maps and recruitment brochures spread across the table. "You're going to face opposition from day one. There will be people who question whether you belong, who assume you're weak, who will try to wash you out of training just because you're female. But if you can get through that, if you can prove yourself beyond any doubt, you'll have opportunities to serve in ways that few people ever get to experience." Maria's decision to enlist wasn't driven by patriotism or adventure. It was driven by the simple knowledge that she possessed a rare skill, and that skill could be used to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. Her grandfather had taught her that with great ability came great responsibility. She had the ability to place a bullet exactly where she wanted it at distances that most people couldn't even see clearly. That ability demanded purpose. Basic training was everything Walsh had warned her it would be, and worse. The drill sergeants seemed to take personal offense to her presence. They questioned her physical strength, her mental toughness, and her commitment to the service. Fellow recruits ranged from supportive to openly hostile. Some resented the attention she received from instructors. Others assumed she had been given special treatment or lower standards. Maria responded to every challenge the same way her grandfather had taught her to approach a difficult shot, with patience, preparation, and unwavering focus. She outperformed her male counterparts in marksmanship, held her own in physical training, and excelled in the academic portions of her military education. When doubters whispered that she was only succeeding because instructors were going easy on her, she volunteered for extra training sessions and additional testing. The breakthrough came during advanced marksmanship training. The exercise was designed to test shooting ability under extreme stress. Recruits had to complete a physically exhausting obstacle course, then immediately transition to precision shooting at multiple targets under time pressure. Heart rates were elevated, hands were shaking, and breathing was labored. Most recruits struggled to hit center mass on targets at 300 yards. Maria hit perfect bullseyes at 500 yards while her heart rate was still over 140 beats per minute. The instructor, a grizzled Marine on loan to the training facility, called Maria aside after the exercise. He had been one of her harshest critics, openly questioning whether women belonged in combat roles. His conversation with her that day marked a turning point not just in her training, but in how she was perceived by fellow recruits and instructors alike. "I've been shooting for 22 years, he told her, his voice carrying a grudging respect that hadn't been there before. "I've trained snipers for 3 different branches of the military. I've seen natural talent, I've seen hard work, and I've seen what happens when the two combine. But what I saw today was something different. You didn't just make those shots. You made them look easy while your body was under the kind of stress that turns most marksmen into prey artists." From that day forward, Maria's reputation preceded her. Word spread through the training facility about the Texas girl who could shoot like a machine, but think like a philosopher. Instructors began using her performance as a benchmark for other recruits. Fellow soldiers stopped questioning her presence and started asking for tips on improving their own marksmanship. But, perhaps most importantly, Maria began to understand the broader implications of her service. She wasn't just a soldier who happened to be female. She was representing all the women who would come after her, proving that gender was irrelevant when it came to serving with distinction. Every shot she made, every challenge she overcame, was paving the way for future generations of female soldiers. The transition from training to active duty was jarring. Maria was assigned to a reconnaissance unit scheduled for deployment to Afghanistan. The men in her unit had been together for multiple tours, had developed the kind of brotherhood that only comes from shared danger and mutual dependence. Her arrival disrupted that dynamic in ways both subtle and obvious. Some soldiers welcomed her with professional courtesy, judging her only on her demonstrated abilities. Others remained skeptical, assuming that her presence would somehow compromise their effectiveness or safety. A few were openly hostile, making it clear that they viewed her as a liability who had been forced on them by politically correct policies rather than military necessity. Maria understood that she couldn't simply fit in. She had to stand out in ways that left no doubt about her capabilities. During training exercises, she volunteered for the most challenging assignments. When the unit practiced urban warfare scenarios, she consistently achieved the highest scores in room clearing and precision shooting. When they trained in mountainous terrain that mimicked the conditions they would face in Afghanistan, she adapted more quickly than soldiers who had been deployed multiple times. Her reputation continued to grow, but so did the pressure. Every mistake was magnified. Every success was scrutinized for signs of favoritism or special treatment. Maria learned to document everything, to ensure that her achievements were measured by the same standards applied to her male counterparts. She also learned to choose her battles carefully, responding to criticism with performance rather than argument. The unit's commanding officer, Captain James Morrison, was initially skeptical of having a female sniper in his unit. Morrison was old-school military, a career soldier who believed that combat effectiveness trumped all other considerations. He had seen politically motivated assignments go wrong before, and he was determined not to let social engineering compromise his soldiers' safety. Maria won him over the same way she had won over her instructors, through consistent, exceptional performance. During a training exercise designed to test long-range shooting ability in adverse conditions, she achieved shots that Morrison had never seen from soldiers with twice her experience. More importantly, she demonstrated the judgment and tactical thinking that separated elite snipers from merely skilled shooters. As the unit prepared for deployment, Maria found herself serving an unofficial mentorship role for newer soldiers while simultaneously proving herself to veterans. She spent extra hours on the rifle range, not just maintaining her own skills, but helping other soldiers improve theirs. She studied military history, learning about famous snipers and the tactical innovations that had shaped modern warfare. But beneath the professional success, Maria carried the weight of representation. She knew that her performance in combat would influence military policy regarding women in combat roles for years to come. Success would open doors for other women. Failure would be used to justify exclusion and discrimination. That knowledge was both motivating and terrifying. The night before deployment, Maria called her grandfather from the base. Miguel Santos, now in his 70s but still sharp as the day he had taught her to shoot, listened as she expressed her fears and doubts. His response was simple but profound. "You've trained your whole life for this," he told her. "Not just your military training, but everything that came before. The hours on the ranch, the competitions, the challenges you've already overcome. Trust your training, trust your instincts, and remember that the best snipers aren't the ones who never miss. They're the ones who make the shot when everything depends on it." As Maria hung up the phone and prepared for what would be her first combat deployment, she could not have imagined that those words would prove prophetic in ways that would shock the military establishment and forever change perceptions about women in combat. The skills she had developed, the challenges she had overcome, and the character she had forged were about to be tested in the ultimate crucible of warfare. Afghanistan hit Maria like a physical blow. The heat, the dust, the smell of burning fuel, and human waste from the forward operating base created a sensory assault unlike anything she had experienced. The mountains that surrounded their position seemed to watch with ancient, hostile eyes, holding secrets and threats that could materialize without warning. This was a land that had broken empires, humbled superpowers, and claimed countless lives across centuries of conflict. Forward Operating Base Warrior was a collection of prefabricated buildings, concrete barriers, and razor wire carved out of the unforgiving Afghan landscape. It housed approximately 800 soldiers from multiple units, creating a small city in the middle of nowhere that operated with military precision 24 hours a day. The base buzzed with constant activity, helicopters landing and taking off, convoys preparing for missions, soldiers training and maintaining equipment. Maria's unit, Bravo Company, was tasked with reconnaissance and target elimination in the surrounding region. Their area of operations included villages that might be friendly, hostile, or shifting between the two depending on the day and the presence of Taliban forces. Intelligence reports were often contradictory, and the soldiers had learned to trust their instincts and their weapons more than briefings from officers who had never left the base. The first few weeks were an education in the realities of modern warfare. Unlike the clear objectives and defined enemies of previous conflicts, Afghanistan presented a complex web of tribal loyalties, religious motivations, and political calculations that shifted constantly. Today's ally could be tomorrow's threat. A village that welcomed American soldiers in the morning might harbor insurgents by evening. Maria quickly discovered that her reputation as an exceptional marksman had preceded her. Soldiers from other units sought her out, curious to see the woman they had heard could outshoot seasoned snipers. Some approached with respect, others with skepticism, but all with the kind of intensity that came from knowing their lives might depend on her skills. Her first combat mission came 3 weeks after arrival. Intelligence had identified a Taliban commander operating out of a compound approximately 10 miles from the base. The commander was reportedly planning attacks on supply convoys, and eliminating him had become a priority for regional command. The mission was straightforward: insert a reconnaissance team, observe the target, and take the shot if the opportunity presented itself. Maria was assigned as the primary sniper, with Sergeant First Class David Chun serving as her spotter. Chun was a veteran of 2 previous deployments, a professional soldier who evaluated people based solely on their ability to keep him alive. He had initially been skeptical of working with a female sniper, but Maria's training performance had impressed him enough to give her the benefit of the doubt. The insertion went smoothly. Under cover of darkness, the team was transported by helicopter to a landing zone 5 miles from the target compound. They moved through rocky terrain for 3 hours, using night vision equipment and practiced stealth to reach an observation position that overlooked the target area. By dawn, they were concealed in a hide site that provided excellent visibility while keeping them invisible to enemy observation. The compound was larger than intelligence reports had indicated. Multiple buildings surrounded a central courtyard, with guards positioned at various points around the perimeter. Over the course of the morning, the team observed normal civilian activity: women hanging laundry, children playing, men working on vehicles. But they also noted indicators of military presence: weapons being moved between buildings, guards changing positions at regular intervals, and vehicles that didn't match the rural setting. At approximately 1,100 hours, the target emerged from the main building. Intelligence photographs had been accurate. The Taliban commander was easily identifiable by his distinctive beard, clothing, and the deference shown to him by other men in the compound. He moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to authority, gesturing animatedly as he spoke with subordinates. The shot would be challenging, but makeable. The distance was approximately 650 yards, well within Maria's capabilities, but the target was moving unpredictably and partially obscured by other people. Wind conditions were variable, and the heat was beginning to create atmospheric disturbance that could affect bullet trajectory. Chun began feeding her information: wind speed and direction, atmospheric pressure, target movement patterns. Maria settled into her shooting position, feeling the familiar calm that descended when she was behind a rifle. Her breathing slowed, her heart rate decreased, and her focus narrowed to encompass only the target and the calculations needed to make the shot. This was the moment she had trained for her entire life, the culmination of everything her grandfather had taught her and every challenge she had overcome in military training. The target paused in the compound courtyard, providing a clear shot window. Maria calculated quickly: 647 yards, wind from the southwest at approximately 8 miles per hour, temperature rising, creating mild atmospheric disturbance. She adjusted her scope accordingly, placing the crosshairs slightly left and high of center mass to account for wind drift and bullet drop. The trigger broke cleanly, the rifle recoiled into her shoulder, and the bullet began its journey across the Afghan landscape. Through her scope, Maria watched the target collapse instantly, the distinctive crack of supersonic bullet impact echoing across the mountains seconds later. The compound erupted in confusion as guards searched for the source of the shot, but the team remained invisible in their concealed position. Chun confirmed the kill, radioing back to base with mission accomplishment. As they prepared to extract from their position, he turned to Maria with an expression that had changed completely from the skepticism he had shown weeks earlier. "That was textbook perfect," he told her, his voice carrying professional admiration. "Range, wind, target movement. You calculated everything correctly and made the shot under real combat conditions. I've worked with snipers who couldn't have made that shot on their best day." The successful mission established Maria's credibility within her unit and began to change perceptions throughout the base. Word spread quickly through military communication networks that the female sniper was not just competent, but exceptional. Officers who had been skeptical began requesting her for high-priority missions. Fellow soldiers who had questioned her presence started seeking her advice on improving their own marksmanship. Over the following months, Maria participated in dozens of missions throughout their area of operations. She eliminated high-value targets, provided overwatch for infantry operations, and conducted reconnaissance missions that required remaining motionless for hours at a time. Her success rate was remarkable. Every shot she took in combat found its target, and her tactical judgment proved consistently sound. But success in Afghanistan was measured by more than just shooting statistics. Maria demonstrated the full range of skills that defined elite snipers. Fieldcraft that kept her team invisible to enemy forces, observation abilities that identified threats others missed, and the emotional stability to function effectively under extreme stress. She became known not just as an exceptional marksman, but as a complete soldier who elevated the performance of every team she joined. The psychological challenges of combat affected Maria differently than she had expected. The act of killing enemy combatants was emotionally complex, requiring constant mental processing and rationalization. She found herself thinking not just about the tactical necessity of each shot, but about the human cost of her actions. These were people with families, histories, and motivations that she would never understand. Yet she also knew that her actions were protecting American soldiers and Afghan civilians who would have been targeted by the men she eliminated. Her grandfather had prepared her for this psychological burden during their conversations at the ranch. Miguel Santos had experienced similar conflicts during his service in Vietnam, and he had taught Maria that the weight of taking human life was a burden that honorable soldiers carried forever. The key was to ensure that every shot served a legitimate military purpose and that the decision to engage was made with careful consideration of all factors. As Maria's reputation grew, so did the expectations placed on her. Mission planners began designing operations specifically around her capabilities, creating scenarios that required exceptional marksmanship and tactical thinking. She found herself working directly with special operations units, supporting missions that were classified well above her security clearance level. These assignments were both honor and burden, representing recognition of her abilities while highlighting the unique pressure she faced as one of the few women in combat roles. The relationships within her unit evolved as well. Initial skepticism had been replaced by professional respect and, in many cases, genuine friendship. Soldiers who had once questioned her presence now fought to have her assigned to their missions. She became an informal mentor to newer soldiers, teaching marksmanship techniques and sharing the lessons her grandfather had taught her about remaining calm under pressure. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Hayes, the base executive officer, took a particular interest in Maria's career development. Hayes was one of the few senior female officers at the base, and she understood the additional challenges that came with breaking barriers in a male-dominated institution. She arranged for Maria to receive additional training opportunities and ensured that her achievements were properly documented and recognized. "You're not just succeeding for yourself," Hayes told Maria during one of their regular meetings. "Every mission you complete successfully makes it easier for the next woman who wants to serve in a combat role. You're proving that gender is irrelevant when it comes to military effectiveness, and that's changing minds throughout the chain of command." Maria appreciated the recognition, but she was also aware of the burden it represented. Her every action was scrutinized not just for tactical effectiveness, but for what it said about women in combat. Success was expected, failure would be amplified and used to justify discrimination. This pressure was something her male counterparts never experienced, an additional weight that she carried into every mission. The most significant test of Maria's abilities came during a complex operation designed to disrupt Taliban communications networks in the region. Intelligence had identified a series of radio relay stations hidden in mountain caves that were being used to coordinate attacks on coalition forces. The mission required multiple teams working in coordination, with snipers providing overwatch and eliminating guards while explosive ordnance specialists destroyed the equipment. Maria was assigned to eliminate guards at the most heavily defended relay station, a position carved into a cliff face that provided excellent defensive advantages for the Taliban fighters protecting it. The shooting position would be over 800 yards from the target, with significant elevation changes and unpredictable wind conditions created by the mountain terrain. The mission required her to remain in position for over 18 hours, waiting for the optimal moment to engage multiple targets in rapid succession. Chen would again serve as her spotter, but they would be operating with minimal support no possibility of extraction if their position was compromised. It was the kind of mission that tested every aspect of sniper training: technical skill, physical endurance, mental toughness, and tactical judgment. As Maria prepared for what would prove to be the most challenging mission of her deployment, she could not have known that it was merely preparation for an even greater test that awaited her. The skills she was developing, the confidence she was building, and the reputation she was establishing would soon be put to the ultimate test in circumstances that would shock the military establishment and forever change how the armed forces viewed women in combat roles. The mountain winds that night seemed to whisper warnings about what was coming, but Maria was focused only on the mission at hand, trusting in her training and the lessons her grandfather had taught her about patience, precision, and the responsibility that came with holding other people's lives in her hands. The operation began at 0300 hours on a moonless November night. Intelligence reports had identified a high-value target meeting scheduled to take place in a village called Shakar, approximately 25 miles from Forward Operating Base Warrior. The meeting was expected to include several Taliban commanders responsible for coordinating attacks against coalition forces throughout the region. It represented the kind of opportunity that could significantly disrupt enemy operations if executed successfully. General Robert Harrison had arrived at the base 3 days earlier to personally oversee the mission. Harrison was old-school military, a career officer who had risen through the ranks during an era when women were excluded from combat roles. He commanded respect throughout the chain of command for his tactical brilliance and his unwavering commitment to his soldiers, but he also carried deeply held beliefs about traditional gender roles in warfare that put him at odds with changing military policies. The general had specifically requested that Maria be excluded from the mission roster. He argued that the operation was too sensitive to risk on an unproven soldier, despite her impressive record over the previous months. When Captain Morrison pointed out that Maria had successfully completed dozens of similar missions, Harrison dismissed her achievements as the result of favorable conditions rather than exceptional skill. "I don't care what her training scores say," Harrison told Morrison during the mission briefing. "This isn't a controlled environment with predictable variables. This is life and death warfare, and I won't risk my soldiers' lives on social experiments." Morrison found himself in an impossible position. Maria was his most effective sniper, with a perfect combat record and tactical skills that exceeded those of soldiers with twice her experience. But Harrison was a general, and generals didn't make suggestions about mission assignments. They gave orders that were expected to be followed without question. The mission plan called for 3 teams to approach the target village from different directions. Alpha Team would establish observation positions on the high ground overlooking the village. Bravo Team would provide security for the primary assault force. Charlie Team, led by Morrison himself, would move into the village to capture or eliminate the enemy commanders. The designated sniper for the mission was Staff Sergeant Mike Torres, a competent marksman who had served 2 previous deployments. Torres was solid, reliable, and followed orders without question. He was also significantly less capable than Maria, a fact that everyone involved in the mission planning understood, but couldn't acknowledge given Harrison's directive. As the teams prepared for insertion, Maria found herself assigned to radio watch at the base communications center. It was busy work designed to keep her occupied while the real soldiers handled the important mission. The assignment was both insulting and potentially dangerous. Her absence from the mission eliminated the unit's most capable marksmen at a time when precision shooting might be the difference between success and catastrophe. Chen approached Maria privately before the teams departed. As her regular spotter, he understood her capabilities better than anyone, and he was frustrated by the decision to exclude her from the mission. But military hierarchy left no room for debate, and both soldiers understood that their personal opinions were irrelevant when orders had been issued. "This is wrong," Chen told her quietly. "You should be out there. Everyone knows you should be out there." Maria's response reflected the discipline and professionalism that had carried her through months of challenges and skepticism. "Our job is to follow orders and support the mission however we can. Torres is a good soldier. The team will complete the mission successfully." But privately, Maria felt a combination of frustration and fear that she couldn't express. Frustration because she was being sidelined due to factors that had nothing to do with her abilities or performance. Fear because she knew the mission was dangerous, and she had confidence that her skills could make the difference between success and disaster. The helicopter insertion went smoothly. All 3 teams reached their designated positions without detection, and Early reports indicated that the intelligence about the enemy meeting was accurate. Multiple vehicles had been observed arriving at the village throughout the evening, and surveillance confirmed the presence of several individuals who matched descriptions of high-value targets. But, as dawn approached, the situation began to deteriorate. The village was more heavily defended than intelligence reports had indicated. Taliban fighters had established defensive positions throughout the area, with weapons emplacements that could cover all likely approach routes. What had been planned as a relatively straightforward capture mission was evolving into a complex urban warfare scenario. Charlie Team's approach to the village was detected approximately 500 yards from their objective. Enemy fighters opened fire with automatic weapons and rocket-propelled grenades, forcing the assault team to take cover in terrain that provided minimal protection. Within minutes, what had been a covert operation became a running firefight with American soldiers pinned down by superior enemy firepower. Alpha Team, positioned on high ground overlooking the village, attempted to provide supporting fire. Torres had clear visibility of enemy positions and began engaging targets at ranges between 400 and 600 yards. His shots were accurate enough to force enemy fighters to take cover, but he was unable to eliminate threats quickly enough to allow Charlie Team to advance or retreat safely. The situation deteriorated further when enemy reinforcements arrived from the north. Additional Taliban fighters, apparently pre-positioned for exactly this type of scenario, moved to surround the American forces. Radio communications became increasingly urgent as team leaders reported mounting casualties and diminishing ammunition supplies. At the base communications center, Maria listened to the unfolding disaster with growing alarm. Through radio chatter, she could piece together the tactical situation. Her friends and fellow soldiers were trapped in a valley with limited escape routes, facing enemy forces that outnumbered them and held superior defensive positions. The mission was failing, and soldiers were going to die unless something changed dramatically. General Harrison, monitoring the operation from the base command center, faced a decision that would define both the mission and his career. He could order immediate extraction, accepting the failure of a high-priority mission and the potential loss of soldiers during the withdrawal. He could commit additional forces, escalating the engagement and risking even more casualties. Or he could adapt his tactical approach to take advantage of resources he had previously refused to consider. The breakthrough moment came when Captain Morrison's voice crackled over the radio with desperate clarity. Charlie Team was taking effective fire from an enemy sniper positioned in a building approximately 1,000 yards from Alpha Team's position. The enemy marksman was systematically targeting American soldiers, and Torres couldn't get a clear shot due to the extreme range and challenging environmental conditions. "We need that sniper eliminated immediately," Morrison reported. "My people are sitting ducks until that threat is neutralized." Torres attempted the shot repeatedly, but the combination of distance, wind, and stress proved too challenging. His bullets struck the building but failed to eliminate the threat. With each missed shot, the enemy sniper grew more confident, exposing himself for longer periods as he searched for American targets. In the command center, Harrison faced the moment that would test everything he believed about military leadership, tactical effectiveness, and personal prejudice. His soldiers were dying, his mission was failing, and his most capable marksman was sitting in the communications center because he had refused to trust her abilities. The radio crackled with Morrison's voice again, more urgent this time. "We've got 2 soldiers down and more wounded. That enemy sniper is going to kill everyone if we can't take him out. I need my best marksman out there now." Everyone in the command center understood what Morrison was asking for without saying it directly. Maria Santos was the best marksman available, possibly the only soldier capable of making a shot at that range under those conditions. But acknowledging that fact would require Harrison to admit that his prejudices had compromised the mission and endangered his soldiers. The general stared at the tactical display showing friendly and enemy positions, calculating distances and angles while listening to increasingly desperate reports from the field. His soldiers were trapped, his carefully planned mission was disintegrating, and time was running out. In that moment, 40 years of military service and deeply held beliefs about combat roles collided with the harsh reality of modern warfare. The decision that followed would be studied in military academies for years to come, not just for its tactical implications, but for what it revealed about leadership under pressure. Harrison reached for the radio microphone, his hand trembling slightly as he prepared to give an order that would challenge everything he thought he knew about women in combat. "Send Santos to the field immediately," he commanded, his voice carrying the weight of recognition that he had been wrong. "Get her to Alpha Team's position. She's our only shot at saving those soldiers." Maria received the order while monitoring radio traffic in the communications center. The transformation was immediate and total. The frustration and helplessness she had felt while listening to her fellow soldiers face mortal danger crystallized into focused determination. This was the moment she had trained for, the ultimate test of everything she had learned and every barrier she had overcome. As she gathered her equipment and prepared for immediate deployment, Maria understood that this mission represented more than just another shooting assignment. It was validation of everything she had fought for, proof that excellence transcends prejudice when lives are at stake. But it was also enormous pressure. Failure would confirm every doubt that had been expressed about women in combat roles. The helicopter ride to Alpha Team's position took 12 minutes that felt like hours. As Maria studied the tactical situation from aerial photographs and radio reports, she began calculating the shot that would either save her fellow soldiers or mark the end of her military career. At 1,000 yards, in mountainous terrain, under combat stress, with the lives of her friends hanging in the balance, she was about to attempt a shot that would test the absolute limits of her abilities. The helicopter dropped Maria at Alpha Team's position with military precision, touching down just long enough for her to leap out with her equipment before lifting off again to avoid becoming a target. The mountain terrain was even more challenging than she had anticipated from aerial photographs. Rocky outcroppings and steep slopes created a maze of potential shooting positions and concealment, but they also generated unpredictable wind patterns that would affect bullet trajectory in ways that were impossible to calculate precisely. Sergeant First Class Rodriguez, Alpha Team's leader, met her at the landing zone with a briefing that was as urgent as it was grim. Charlie Team remained pinned down in the valley below, taking casualties from an enemy sniper who had proven impossible to eliminate. Torres had attempted the shot 17 times without success, and the enemy marksman was growing increasingly bold, exposing himself for longer periods as he searched for American targets. "The distance is right at 1,000 yards, Rodriguez told Maria as they moved quickly toward Alpha Team's observation position. "Maybe a little more. The wind is swirling because of the mountain terrain, and there's thermal distortion from the heat rising off the valley floor. Torres is a good shooter, but this is beyond his capabilities." As they reached the shooting position, Maria's first glimpse of the tactical situation confirmed that this would be the most challenging shot of her life. The enemy sniper was positioned in the upper floor of a 3-story building that dominated the village center. He had excellent fields of fire covering all approaches to the village, and his position was partially protected by concrete walls that limited the available target area to a window approximately 18 inches wide. The environmental conditions were nightmare fuel for any marksman. The mountain terrain created wind patterns that shifted direction and intensity unpredictably. Heat rising from the valley floor created atmospheric distortion that would affect bullet flight path. The extreme range meant that even tiny errors in calculation would result in complete misses, and there would be no opportunity for follow-up shots once the enemy sniper realized he was being targeted. Chen had been flown in with Maria to serve as her spotter. Together, they began the methodical process of analyzing every factor that would influence the shot. Using range-finding equipment, they confirmed the distance at 1,047 yards. Wind measurement devices indicated gusts ranging from 8 to 15 miles per hour, shifting between southwest and west. Atmospheric pressure was slightly lower than standard due to the altitude, which would affect bullet trajectory. But perhaps most challenging was the movement of the target itself. The enemy sniper was not stationary. He moved between different positions within the building, appearing at various windows as he searched for American soldiers to engage. Maria would have to predict his movement pattern and position herself to take advantage of brief exposure windows that might last only seconds. Through her rifle scope, Maria studied the enemy position with the intensity her grandfather had taught her during those long afternoons on the ranch. She noted the rhythm of the sniper's movements, the length of time he spent at each position, and the environmental factors that might influence his behavior. This was not just marksmanship. It was psychology, physics, and tactical thinking combined into a single moment of truth. Meanwhile, in the valley below, Charlie Team's situation continued to deteriorate. The enemy sniper had wounded 2 more soldiers, and ammunition was running dangerously low. Captain Morrison's voice over the radio carried barely controlled desperation as he reported their status to the command center. "We've got 4 wounded and can't move to extract them," Morrison reported. "That sniper has us completely pinned down. If Santos can't take him out in the next few minutes, we're going to lose people." The pressure was enormous, but Maria felt the familiar calm that descended when she was behind a rifle facing an important shot. This was what she had trained for, what her grandfather had prepared her for during all those years of patient instruction. The chaos of combat, the desperate voices on the radio, the knowledge that friends' lives depended on her abilities, all of it faded into background noise as she focused on the technical challenges of the shot. Chun fed her a steady stream of information: wind speed and direction changes, atmospheric conditions, target movement patterns. But ultimately, the shot would come down to Maria's ability to integrate all these factors into a single moment of perfect timing and execution. At 1,047 yards, she would have approximately 1.3 seconds of bullet flight time, during which the target could move, the wind could shift, or atmospheric conditions could change enough to cause a miss. The mathematics of the shot were staggering. At that range, accounting for bullet drop meant aiming approximately 8 feet above the target. Wind drift could push the bullet several feet left or right, depending on conditions at the moment of firing. The target window was so small that an error of inches would result in a clean miss, and there would be no opportunity for correction. Maria made her final calculations and settled into her shooting position. The rifle felt familiar and comfortable in her hands, an extension of her will and training. Through the scope, she could see the enemy sniper moving between positions, searching for targets with the confidence of someone who believed himself beyond the range of effective counterfire. The moment of truth came when the enemy sniper moved to a window that provided Maria with the clearest shot angle. He exposed himself for approximately 4 seconds as he lined up a shot at Charlie Team's position, unaware that he was being observed by someone with the skills to engage at extreme range. Maria's breathing slowed to almost nothing. Her heart rate decreased to the steady rhythm that preceded her best shooting. The crosshairs of her scope settled on a point approximately 8 feet above and 2 feet left of where she could see the enemy sniper's head. Every variable had been calculated, every environmental factor accounted for. Now it came down to the fundamentals: breathing, trigger control, and follow-through. The trigger broke cleanly, the rifle recoiled into her shoulder, and the bullet began its journey across the Afghan valley. For 1.3 seconds, the fate of multiple American soldiers hung in the balance as a small piece of metal traveled through mountain air toward a target that most marksmen couldn't even see clearly with a rifle scope. The impact was visible through Maria's scope as the enemy sniper collapsed instantly. The distinctive crack of supersonic bullet impact echoed across the valley several seconds later, followed by an immediate change in the tactical situation below. Without the enemy snipers suppressing fire, Charlie Team could finally move to extract their wounded and begin fighting their way out of the village. Chun confirmed the kill through his spotting scope, his voice carrying amazement despite his years of experience with skilled marksmen. Target eliminated. Clean hit center mass. That was the best shot I've ever seen. But there was no time for celebration. The successful elimination of the enemy sniper had created an opportunity for Charlie Team to extract, but they still faced significant enemy forces throughout the village. Maria and Alpha Team provided overwatch as the trapped soldiers fought their way out of the urban terrain, engaging additional targets as they presented themselves. Over the next 2 hours, Maria made 7 more shots at ranges between 600 and 900 yards, eliminating enemy fighters who threatened the extraction operation. Each shot was successful, each one calculated with the same methodical precision that had characterized her legendary 1,047-yard kill. By the time Charlie Team reached safety, Maria had single-handedly eliminated 8 enemy fighters and cleared multiple extraction routes. The helicopter extraction went smoothly, with all American soldiers successfully recovered despite their wounds. As Maria's aircraft lifted off from Alpha Team's position, she could see the village below where Taliban fighters were still searching for threats that no longer existed. The mission had been salvaged from disaster through exceptional marksmanship and tactical thinking, but, more importantly, soldiers were alive who would not have survived without her intervention. During the flight back to base, Chun attempted to process what he had witnessed. He had served as a spotter for multiple snipers over 3 deployments, working with some of the most skilled marksmen in the military. But Maria's performance that day represented something different, a combination of technical skill and mental toughness that he had never seen before. "I need to ask you something," Chun said over the helicopter's intercom. "How did you know the shot would work?" At that range, with those conditions, the margin for error was essentially zero. What made you confident enough to take it? Maria's response reflected the years of training and the philosophy her grandfather had instilled in her about the responsibility that came with exceptional ability. I didn't know it would work, but I knew that if I didn't take it, soldiers were going to die. When you have the skills to help people and you choose not to use them, you become responsible for what happens next. As the base came into view, Maria could see vehicles and personnel gathered on the landing pad. Word of her achievement had already spread through military communication networks, and the reception waiting for her would mark the beginning of a transformation in how the armed forces viewed women in combat roles. But, in that moment, flying over the Afghan landscape with wounded soldiers in the aircraft beside her, Maria was thinking not about recognition or career advancement. She was thinking about the lessons her grandfather had taught her about duty, responsibility, and the weight of holding other people's lives in her hands. The shot that would make her famous was, for her, simply the logical conclusion of a lifetime of preparation for the moment when everything would depend on her ability to put a bullet exactly where it needed to go. As the helicopter touched down at Forward Operating Base Warrior, Maria Santos had no way of knowing that her 1,047-yard shot would become military legend, studied in sniper schools, and cited in policy discussions about women in combat for decades to come. She only knew that she had done her job, used her skills to protect fellow soldiers, and proven that excellence transcends every barrier when lives are at stake. General Harrison was waiting at the landing pad when Maria's helicopter touched down. The man who had ordered her exclusion from the mission less than 8 hours earlier stood at attention as she disembarked with her equipment, his expression a mixture of professional respect and personal revelation. The general who had built his career on traditional military values was about to participate in a moment that would challenge everything he thought he understood about combat effectiveness and gender roles in warfare. As Maria approached, Harrison did something that shocked everyone present. He saluted her, a gesture of respect from a superior officer that was unprecedented in her experience. The formal recognition was witnessed by dozens of soldiers and officers who had gathered to welcome the returning teams, and word of the general's gesture spread through the base within hours. "Sergeant Santos," Harrison said, his voice carrying the weight of acknowledgement that went far beyond military courtesy. "I owe you an apology. I made a decision based on prejudice rather than performance, and that decision nearly cost American lives. Your actions today saved soldiers and completed a mission that would have failed without your intervention." The general's public apology was extraordinary not just for its content, but for its setting. Senior military officers rarely admitted errors in judgment, particularly when those errors related to controversial policies about women in combat. Harrison's willingness to acknowledge his mistake in front of witnesses represented a level of professional integrity that enhanced rather than diminished his reputation among the soldiers under his command. But, perhaps more importantly, the apology marked a turning point in military policy discussions about gender and combat roles. Harrison's experience with Maria's performance would influence his testimony before congressional committees and military review boards for years to come. The general who had been skeptical of women in combat became one of the most effective advocates for eliminating gender-based restrictions on military service. The immediate aftermath of the mission created a media sensation that neither Maria nor the military hierarchy had anticipated. Within days, news organizations throughout the United States were reporting on the female sniper who had made an impossible shot to save trapped soldiers. The story captured public imagination in ways that highlighted both the heroic nature of Maria's actions and the ongoing debates about women's roles in society. Television interviews, newspaper articles, and online discussions transformed Maria from an unknown soldier into a national symbol. Some commentators focused on her exceptional marksmanship skills and tactical thinking. Others used her story to advocate for expanded opportunities for women in military and civilian careers. Still others attempted to minimize her achievements or question the accuracy of reports about her performance. Maria found the media attention deeply uncomfortable. She had joined the military to serve her country and use her skills to protect fellow soldiers, not to become a public figure or political symbol. The constant requests for interviews, the analysis of her personal background, and the scrutiny of her every action created pressures that were completely different from anything she had faced in combat. Captain Morrison, who had commanded Maria throughout her deployment, helped her navigate the media landscape while protecting her from excessive exposure. He understood that her value to the military extended far beyond any single mission, and he worked to ensure that publicity didn't interfere with her continued service or personal well-being. "You've become something you never intended to be," Morrison told her during one of their regular meetings. "You're a symbol, and that comes with responsibilities that go beyond military duties. But don't let the noise distract you from what's really important. You're still a soldier, and you still have a job to do." The military response to Maria's achievement was complex and multifaceted. Her successful completion of the mission provided undeniable evidence that women could perform at the highest levels in combat roles, but it also highlighted the institutional barriers and prejudices that had limited opportunities for female soldiers. Military leaders found themselves facing difficult questions about policies that had excluded qualified personnel based on gender rather than ability. Within weeks of the mission, Maria received orders for reassignment to the Army Marksmanship Unit, an elite training organization responsible for developing sniper techniques and training the next generation of precision shooters. The assignment was both recognition of her exceptional abilities and an opportunity for her to influence military training programs throughout the armed forces. The transition from combat deployment to training assignment required Maria to develop new skills in instruction and curriculum development. She discovered that teaching marksmanship was as challenging as practicing it, requiring her to analyze and articulate techniques that had become instinctive through years of training and experience. Her students initially approached her with the same mixture of skepticism and curiosity that she had encountered throughout her military career. Male soldiers who had never worked with a female instructor wondered whether she could relate to their experiences and challenges. Female soldiers looked to her as a role model and source of inspiration, but also worried about meeting the impossibly high standards she represented. Maria's teaching philosophy reflected the lessons her grandfather had taught her about patience, precision, and personal responsibility. She emphasized that exceptional marksmanship was not about natural talent, but about systematic training, careful preparation, and the willingness to practice fundamental skills until they became automatic responses under stress. But, perhaps most importantly, she taught her students that being a sniper carried moral and emotional responsibilities that extended far beyond technical competence. Every shot taken in combat had consequences that would affect not just the immediate tactical situation, but the shooter's psychological well-being for years to come. "Anyone can learn to hit targets on a rifle range," she told new classes during their first day of instruction. "What separates military snipers from recreational shooters is the ability to make life and death decisions under extreme pressure and live with the consequences of those decisions. Technical skills are just the beginning of what you need to succeed in combat." Maria's influence on military training extended beyond marksmanship instruction. Her success in Afghanistan had demonstrated that physical strength was less important than previously believed for certain combat roles, while mental toughness, tactical thinking, and emotional stability were universal requirements that had no relationship to gender. These insights influenced training programs throughout the military, leading to more inclusive approaches that evaluated soldiers based on performance rather than demographics. The long-term impact of Maria's achievement became evident as other women began succeeding in previously restricted military roles. Her example had proven that exceptional performance could overcome institutional prejudice, creating opportunities for female soldiers who possessed the skills and determination to excel in challenging assignments. But success also brought unexpected challenges. Maria discovered that being a pioneering figure meant that her every action was scrutinized for what it said about women in general rather than evaluated on its own merits. Failures or mistakes that would be overlooked in male soldiers became evidence of broader inadequacies. Successes were either minimized or attributed to special treatment rather than earned achievement. 5 years after her legendary shot in Afghanistan, Maria was promoted to sergeant major, becoming one of the youngest soldiers and the first woman to hold that rank within the Army Marksmanship Unit. The promotion represented not just recognition of her individual achievements, but acknowledgement of her contributions to military training and policy development. During the promotion ceremony, General Harrison, now serving as the Army's Deputy Chief of Staff, spoke about the lessons he had learned from working with Maria. His remarks focused not just on her technical skills, but on the leadership qualities she had demonstrated throughout her career. "Sergeant Major Santos taught me that true military effectiveness comes from utilizing the best personnel available, regardless of demographics," Harrison said. Her achievements forced me to examine my own prejudices and recognize that institutional barriers were preventing us from maximizing our capabilities. She made us better not just as soldiers, but as leaders. Maria's grandfather, Miguel Santos, attended the promotion ceremony wearing the dress uniform he had preserved from his own military service decades earlier. At 83 years old, he had lived to see his granddaughter achieve recognition that exceeded anything he had imagined when he first taught her to shoot on the ranch in Texas. During a quiet moment after the ceremony, Miguel reflected on the journey that had brought them both to this point. The lessons he had taught about patience, precision, and responsibility had taken root in ways that had changed not just his granddaughter's life, but military policy throughout the armed forces. "I taught you to shoot because I thought it would give you confidence and discipline," he told Maria as they sat together watching the sunset over the training facility. "I never imagined that those skills would allow you to save lives and change the military forever. But I'm not surprised. You always had the character to use your abilities for something bigger than yourself." As Maria looked back on her career, she realized that her journey had been about much more than marksmanship or military service. She had participated in a fundamental transformation of how society viewed women's capabilities and contributions. The shot that made her famous had been important not just for its technical difficulty, but for what it proved about the relationship between ability and opportunity. Today, the story of Maria Santos and her 1,047-yard shot is taught in military academies as both a case study in exceptional marksmanship and an example of how institutional prejudices can compromise military effectiveness. Her achievement opened doors for countless women who followed, proving that excellence transcends every barrier when given the opportunity to flourish. But perhaps the most important legacy of that day in Afghanistan was not the shot itself, but the recognition that talent and determination have no gender. Maria Santos had proven that when lives are at stake, what matters is not who pulls the trigger, but whether they can put the bullet exactly where it needs to go. In doing so, she changed not just military policy, but the fundamental understanding of what it means to serve with honor and distinction. The woman who had been told to stand aside had instead stepped forward when everything depended on her abilities. In that moment of ultimate pressure, she had delivered not just a perfect shot, but a perfect example of how courage, skill, and determination could overcome any obstacle. The echo of that single bullet traveling across an Afghan valley continues to resonate through military training facilities and policy discussions today, a lasting reminder that excellence knows no boundaries when given the chance to prove itself.